Hi, everybody. How are you, Facebook? How's everybody doing today? I'm just going to take a moment to share this to my groups, to Room for Healing, etc. All right. So, anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Laura Mazzotta. I'm the Akashic therapist, which means that I've been a therapist for almost 20 years now. And I also guide individuals who are looking for deep levels of healing, most efficient and effective levels of healing to be able to activate really the core spiritual piece of who they are, their passion, and be able to forward themselves into the best versions of who they are and really bring forward to the world what they're meant to bring forward, right? Really feeling more energized, more confident, more alive, right? Helping people get to that level of amazing that I'm so excited to be in my life now. So let me know if you're here. Please say hello if you're hopping on. Take a moment to share this out for anybody that you think could benefit from learning more about how to manage fear. I'm reading a book in Room for Healing called Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. It's a fantastic book. I started reading it. I just kind of stumbled upon it. It just kind of appeared in my field. And I'm so thankful that I grabbed it because it's beautiful and there's information in here that I think everybody needs to hear and really would benefit from. So I've been encouraging it to everybody that I speak with at this point that's willing to listen and sharing the videos and experience and exercises in this book in Room for Healing, which is my private Facebook group that I have linked in the description of this video. So definitely check in there and you're able to check out the unit section for not only the other chapters, but for a previous book study that we did and for other master classes that healers and professionals and change makers have come into the group to share so that people have additional healing tools and assistance. Okay. There's just a couple more shares here. I don't see anybody else jumping live quite yet. So I am going to take advantage of making this accessible to more and more people while I wait for people to jump on. All right. So again, say hello if you're here and where you're tuning in from. Okay. We're going to get started here in just a second. All right. I think we're good. Cool. All right, so think like a monk. What we reviewed in chapter 3 already and Room for Healing, I'm going to give you a brief summary. Okay, so that we're not just, since we're starting in the middle of a chapter here. Okay, so what we started talking about there was really this idea of, really getting to the root of our fear rather than just distracting ourselves from it. There's a lot of therapeutic tools, particularly cognitive tools or DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy tools, that are very helpful with managing and distracting ourselves from fear, okay, or any kind of negative cognitions or thoughts that come into our minds or belief systems, okay? But unfortunately, what that does is it just provides us with a band aid, something temporary that allows us to get through that moment, feel a little better, but then it keeps coming back and it becomes this repetitive pattern in our lives, right? So he's talking about really asking yourself, what am I afraid of? What am I really afraid of? What am I really afraid of? What am I really afraid of? Over and over again until you get to the core. And what you're going to find is that a lot of your fears are rooted in either one limiting belief or just a couple limiting beliefs. So every time a fear comes up for you, you're going to start to notice with your awareness as you become more conscious of this process and this pattern, what your underlying theme is. And then once you can identify that, you tackle that underlying theme, and then it relieves pressure on all of these other areas of your life. Okay? So he talks about, I'm just going to share a couple more things here before we move forward with the second part of the chapter. Oh, this was one of my favorite parts that I shared in Room for Healing, was this idea that they created this biosphere in Arizona, okay? And they had air that had been purified, clean water, nutrient-rich soil, and lots of natural light, okay? Ideal living conditions. But the trees kept falling over. And what they realized is that the reason that the trees were not surviving or doing well once they grew to a certain point is that they didn't have wind. So they needed this resistance, they needed this pressure to be able to, it says, respond to the pressure and agitation by growing stronger bark and deeper roots to increase their stability. So we think about fear, we think about stress coming into our lives, putting that pressure on us actually encourages us to make our roots more grounded, to be more solidified in who we are, and to, as they say, grow a thicker skin, right? Be able to identify our boundaries, be able to know what we are, where we are giving too much, where we are over giving. Okay. All right. So let's see if there's anything else. The only other thing that I'll share with you is he added this, or he shares this exercise called rating your fear, just to put it in perspective, right? Be able to say, like, I see you as my fear, but let me think about the worst thing that I could really be afraid of that could ever happen. And then you're going to have a scale of like 0 to 10 and really putting it in perspective to determine, okay, this is really not as significant as that worst fear that I've thought of, right? And also asking your fear, when do I feel you? Right? When do I feel you? When do you come up? To start to identify the patterns that show up within your fear. Because what you'll notice is they also have a theme. It's not just the root, but also how does this present in my actual life, in my human life? And that carries a theme as well. Okay? By developing intimacy with your fear, getting up close and examining what you're afraid of, you end up with information that leaves you more empowered because you start to notice these patterns, you start to be able to predict, you start to be more preventive with your mental health, with your physical health, etc. Because if we're experiencing fear, it means that we're having a fight or flight response. I've done a video on that for Woken TV that you can look back to if you'd like as well. But we have that fight or flight response. And it's not the fact that that comes up that's a problem. It's how we respond to it. It's what we do with it. And when we transmute it or transform it into something that really serves us and helps educate us about how to manage our energy the next time, we become more informed. We become more in control of our choices and decision making. Okay. And then the last thing he says here that I reviewed in Room for Healing was that the cause of fear is attachment and the cure for fear is detachment. Okay, so when we shift from I am angry to I feel angry, there's a big difference because we're not identifying as the emotion. A monk mind practices detachment. And that's the whole point of him writing this book, is saying he went back and forth between living in an ashram and interning in the corporate world and working in the corporate world. And so he had this oscillation back and forth between, proving himself to society and making his parents proud and doing the things he was supposed to do and that he should do, and living like a monk. And so he's teaching us how to integrate this into human life on a day-to-day basis, okay? And one of my favorite parts of this detachment piece is he's saying that when we acknowledge that all of our blessings, which means our children, our loved ones, our material items, anything that's going on in our lives, our health, right? All of our blessings are like a fancy rental car or a beautiful Airbnb, meaning that they're temporary. They're not ours. We don't own them. When we realize we are renting everything on this earth, we are free to enjoy them without living in constant fear of losing them. We are lucky vacationers enjoying our stay on Hotel Earth. Okay. And then he took us through an exercise on auditing your attachments. Okay. So you guys can enter Room for Healing too, if you'd like to just, and it's just a free Facebook group. So you guys can jump in there if you want through the link. But I'm going to enter here into a discussion about the second part of this chapter. Okay. And what he's talking about here is he talks about managing short-term fears and gives us some exercises to manage that. And I'm going to share those with you now. Okay? So he says that fear makes us fiction writers. We start with a premise, an idea, a fear, like what will happen if. This spirals off, devising possible future scenarios. When we anticipate future outcomes, fear holds us back, imprisoning us in our imaginations. Our fears are more numerous than our dangers, and we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. The problem is we can also wire our minds and our nervous system to believe that that's our reality if we are in a constant state of fear, because our subconscious mind does not know the difference between these daydreams or these imaginative processes that we're playing out in our mind and actual reality. So the more that we play this out, the more we are wiring our nervous system to believe that that's reality. Okay? Okay. So he says that, he gives this example, okay? I passed along some advice to someone I had advised who had lost his job. Instead of judging the moment, he needed to accept his situation, whatever came of it, focusing on what he could control. I worked with him on first slowing everything down and then acknowledging the facts of his situation. He'd lost his job, period. From there, he had a choice. He could panic or freeze and take this opportunity to work, or he could take this opportunity to work with fear as a tool, using it as an indicator of what truly mattered to him and see what new opportunities might arise. Okay? That's a big, big mindset shift that takes time and patience that I strongly encourage you to explore. Shifting from panic to opportunity. Every single labeled negative thing that shows up in your life is truly an opportunity. Everything that presents in our field is an opportunity. Okay, so shifting when you get hurt, when you get sick, and getting curious about what is the opportunity here, rather than playing the victim, rather than saying something's wrong with me or what's wrong with me, right? Okay. So the number one way to short circuit fear is to use your breath. Okay? Panic and freezing are a disconnect between our bodies and our minds. Use your breath to realign your body and your mind. So the suggestion that he makes here, this is exercise 1 in this part of the chapter, is to inhale slowly to a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale slowly to a count of 4 or more, and then just keep repeating it until you feel your heart rate slow down. Deep breathing activates a part of our nervous system called the vagus nerve, which in turn stimulates a relaxation response throughout our bodies. So I talked about this in my fight or flight video. The parasympathetic nervous system is activated. That's what activates our relaxation response. And that's activated with a minimum of 3 deep breaths. Diaphragmatic deep breathing, where you're literally scooping out your pelvic bowl all the way down there into the bottom of where your womb is, right? Almost like you're scooping it out with your breath. The ideal is to do this for 7 breaths. Average is 5, minimum is 3. My favorite breath for realigning the body and your mind, slowing down your breathing, and really activating this relaxation response is alternate nostril breathing, where you hold one side and breathe in, hold the other side and breathe out. Really long, deep breaths, because you're constricting the amount of room that is available for your breath to move through. So it forces your breathing to go as slowly as possible. Then you go back in that other side again, and then breathe out the other. Again, recommended a minimum of 3 breaths, average of 5, ideal is 7. Okay? If you just stop and do this 3 times a day, especially because you're setting your intention, and that's the next chapter, which is intention. You're setting your intention to do so, to take time aside to rewire your mind, to rewire your nervous system. You're communicating something. You're communicating something to yourself and to the universe that you're reliable, that you're deserving, that you're taking this time for you. Okay? The second part of managing short-term fears is to see the whole story. See our lives as a whole, single, long, continuing story, not disconnected pieces, right? So when we see what we're currently going through or the current fear that we have and how that plays out as an act in a play, as a scene of a much larger story and a larger picture, we can again put it in perspective, right? So he gives us an exercise for this one as well. It called expanding the moment. Think of something great that has happened to you. Perhaps it was the birth of a child, getting a new job you wanted. Let yourself feel that joy for a moment. Now rewind to the events that occurred just before that. What was going on in your life before you got that job, before you had that child, before you got that big raise? Perhaps it was months and months of trying unsuccessfully to conceive or being rejected from other jobs that you'd applied for. Try to see that as an entire story, okay? A progression from labeled bad to labeled good, okay? And start to open your awareness to realizing that those steps prior to that seemed so desperately awful or so negative were actually steps and clearing the way and opening up opportunity for you to have this level of celebration, right? That it's all unfolding to support your highest good, okay? The more we practice looking in the rearview mirror and finding gratitude for the hard times we've experienced, the more we start to change our programming. The gap between suffering and gratitude gets smaller and smaller. And I can say this with experience, that gratitude I felt was being shoved down my throat for years. And I just wasn't receptive to it. I didn't believe in it. And I can tell you that when you actually start to practice it and you let go of those egoic beliefs about it, and you don't wait until you're starting to feel it to start practicing the practice, it will unfold so beautifully in your field and assist you with making you more resilient, making you automatically see the positive and the opportunity in situations. So you can start this as simply as having a very specific gratitude practice. And this can be as simple as waking up in the morning being thankful you opened your eyes, thankful that you can stand on 2 feet and walk to the bathroom, thankful you have indoor plumbing, thankful that you have the money to buy toothpaste, right? Okay, so 2 other points here before the end of this chapter. He talks about revisiting long-term fears, okay? So this is the 3rd part to managing short-term fears. Short-circuiting fear with the breath, seeing the whole story, and then revisiting long-term fears, okay? When we deny fear, our problems follow us. If we don't learn from the signal that alerts us to a problem, because that's what fear is, right? It alerts us. It's a signal. It's a cue. And instead of getting freaked out, we can just look at it curiously as if it's just a new piece of data or information that's dropping into our awareness, okay? It's alerting us. And if we don't learn from this signal that alerts us to a problem, we'll end up learning from the results of the problem itself, which is far less desirable, correct? So when we have a fear, when we have any kind of negative emotion that comes into our awareness, when we do not pay attention to it, when we don't process it or understand it. And again, this is really patterned emotions, okay? Because it's not like you're going to analyze and really dive into and find opportunity in every tiny little thing that appears in your field. If we did that, great, but I also don't want you to get into too egoic of a space to be constantly analyzing that everything that comes up for you, okay? Because you're going to exhaust yourself. Because emotions are energy and they are meant to just move through us. Okay, so when it arises, if it's something that's continually arising and you feel like, okay, I'm trying to allow this to just move through me, but it just keeps showing up, okay, then it warrants your attention, right? It warrants some acknowledgement and a greater level of understanding, okay? At which point he has an example here called dive into your fears. Asking yourself, what am I really afraid of? This is that concept I was talking to you about earlier. And when you start with these first few surface level fears, what am I really afraid of? Well, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my job. And then what am I really afraid of? I'm afraid that I'm not going to have an income. Well, what am I really afraid of? I'm afraid that I won't be able to support my family. Well, what am I really afraid of? I'm afraid they'll resent me. Well, what am I really afraid of? I'm afraid they'll leave me. Or my marriage will fail, or I won't have access to my children. What am I really afraid of? I'm afraid I'll be alone. right? And you keep following that because you'll get deeper and deeper and deeper with your fears when you do that. And this is not to spiral you into a place where you feel out of control. And if you feel concerned about that, do this with a support person, do this with a companion or a mentor or a loved one, okay? But you get to the root and understand that the root doesn't always come up the first time you do this exercise. It can unfold over time. You can get to a certain point and then you might have to process this again, maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, etc. Okay? All right. All right, so let me know if you guys have any questions that are coming up. This is the end of chapter 3, which is on fear from Think Like a Monk. The next one is on intention. And I encourage you to join Room for Healing to look at the other chapters as well. There's so much wisdom in this book. I love that he gives us tangible, applicable exercises so that we can start to actually implement this in our lives and see how this wisdom unfolds. It's not just interesting and curious wisdom that we're just feeding our intellect, right? These are changes that we need to make a commitment to, that we need to set intentions for making changes in our lives, okay? And if you end up watching this video, it's because you are being called to make a change, to having a greater level of awareness and understanding and intimacy with yourself, with your emotions, with your bodily sensations, etc., okay? And I'll just leave you with, fear motivates us. Sometimes it motivates us toward what we want, but sometimes if we're not careful, it can limit us with what we think will keep us safe. It introduces self-doubt. It introduces the doubt that we are our own safe foundation, and we are. We are our own safe foundations. Okay, and as you establish that and solidify that, you're going to have less and less of a need for fear. And the more that fear snaps and you jump, the more that you give it the message that it can dictate to you. Okay, so allow yourself to become your own authority by gaining a greater level of awareness around fear as a cue, as a signal, as a buddy of yours, as a friend, as an information provider. Okay, so and join me in Room for Healing, and I would love to see you and connect with you more intimately there. I post a lot of content in Room for Healing, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful group of people who are on the spiritual and self-development path. And I also just encourage you to get the book, Think Like a Monk, because it's wonderful. And I know it will assist anyone really right now on their journey. It's a beautiful time in the world to be really waking up to a lot of understanding of how you tick, because the changes collectively in our world and in our universe occur by us changing on an individual level, taking responsibility for our own growth and our own shifting. Okay. So I really encourage you to join me there. The doors have officially opened now for the Akashic Record Certification program called RISE, which is starting in January of 2021. So I will put the link here. You can check out the information on that program. And please feel free to reach out to me individually to ask about more details, and I'm happy to discuss it with you. The people, the souls that are in that program now are absolutely blowing me away. We are over halfway through this program at this point, probably 2/3 of the way through, and they're just slaying it. They're all stepping up now and starting their own businesses and sharing this with the world. And it's so beautiful to see how the Akashic Records and the universe really calls us forward to do this work, right? It's not something that we consciously choose necessarily, although we can choose against it, not listening to the call. Or we can choose to not listen to the call, I should say. But, you know, we're really called to this work. So I really encourage you to listen if it's just generating any level of interest in your field, because the Akashic Records found me. I didn't find them. And the same goes for all of my clients. So just allow yourself to get curious, to learn more about opportunity. The more information that we have to put on the table, we can look at it all spread out and decide what's a good fit for us. And if you need help doing that, please feel free to reach out. All right. Have an awesome, awesome night, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.